By rule of thumb, comics are usually quite transparent with which characters are gonna get a dark backstory. Brooding, all black wearing anti-hero, probably gonna have a rough time. The cheerful comic relief character, a wholesome, spotless upbringing. But this isn't always the case. Often some of the darkest backstories come from characters you wouldn't expect to have them, either for shock value or as a handy reminder that not everyone with a sad origin story has to don a black leather trench coat. Allowing characters to not be permanently soured by their history allows them to feel more like real people, who are 9 times out of 10 capable of overcoming bad experiences without it giving them a goth phase. So with that in mind, I'm Will for What Culture, and here are 10 Marvel heroes with surprisingly tragic origins.
But before we begin, I just want to quickly tell you about today's list sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. Raid is a new free-to-play RPG that is growing super fast. In just 3 months, the game has already amassed over 10 million players. I can't even imagine that many people, but I can imagine why they'd want to be in on this game. It boasts great graphics, 3 spectacular locations, PvP battles, an amazing storyline, and over 400 champions to collect and customize. Just check out the graphics and the details on those champions, and in Raid, you have the ability to customize and choose the artifacts for each and every one of them. The game is growing super fast, and the highly anticipated new Faction Wars feature is now live. Raid is getting rave reviews, and with over 300,000 player ratings, it has a near perfect score on the Play Store, so what are you waiting for? Go to the video description, click on our special link, and you'll nab yourself 50,000 silver and a free epic champion as part of the new player program to start your journey. Good luck, and I'll see you there.
Number 10, Goldballs. Continuing a concerning trend of joke characters being given inordinately tragic backstories, Goldballs discovered his powers in the middle of someone trying to rob him. The whole thing looks exceedingly traumatic, not helped by the fact that after Fabio stops shooting balls, the police come to arrest him, having presumed that the young mutant is attempting to assault everyone he's hit with the golden orbs. If you can't feel sorry for a screaming teen uncontrollably shooting magical eggs from himself, then there's likely few people you can feel sorry for, as Fabio's discovery of his powers literally couldn't get any worse if he tried. Number 9, Demolition Man. Given he's a knockoff Wolverine with the nickname D-Man, you'd be forgiven for thinking that Demolition Man would, backstory-wise, have minimal depth. However, his origins are surprisingly bittersweet, with the young Dennis Dunphy wanting nothing more than to be a superhero. As he grew up, however, Dennis's dreams changed, and he decided instead to become a professional athlete. Dreams which would be dashed when every sports team he applied to rejected him. Devastated, Dunphy sought out enhanced strength and speed from the villain known as the Power Broker in order to improve his abilities. In an ironic twist, gaining these enhancements meant that the would-be sportsman was too powerful to play any sport without harming those around him, and so the Demolition Man was born. While Dunphy never seems put out about becoming a superhero, there's something incredibly sad about the fact that by the time he became a hero, Dennis didn't actually want to be one. Number 8, Skin. Mixing the world's creepiest superpower and the world's saddest backstory into one huge mess, Skin started out life as Angel Espinosa, a young man dating a gang member named Torres. After Torres turned a night drive into a night drive-by shooting, the stress of this event would kickstart Angel's dormant powers, turning him grey, giving him the ability to stretch his skin out several feet, and knocking him out cold. This was surprising enough to Torres that she crashed the car, leaving Angel to regain consciousness in a car wreck, with his girlfriend nowhere to be found, having presumably fled the scene, and her friend dead in the burning remains. Fearing how his family would react to his unnerving mutation, and knowing that Torres would likely face murder charges for the car accident were a witness to be alive, Espinosa left town, joining the X-Men in hopes of learning how to control his powers. Number 7, US Agent. Initially just a cheap rip-off of Captain America, the US Agent, known perhaps better as John Walker, would develop over time into his own character, with the only remaining similarity between the two being their tragic backstories. John's combat training comes from his time in the forces, which he joined in honor of his brother Michael, who had died in the Vietnam War. Disillusioned with the life of a soldier, Walker would attempt to become a superhero, which would see his parents killed by villains and him beat up by Captain America in a beautifully awful chain of dominoes. While the US agent's life would never become easier, down the road he would end up losing an arm and a leg in a fight against the Thunderbolts leader Nuke, Walker would steadily become kinder and less quick to anger over time, providing a surprisingly unique character arc for a hero who started off as a total copy of another. Number 6, Brew. Being hated by your entire species for caring about people sounds like the worst time possible. This being your life for your entire upbringing sounds even worse, which means it's safe to say that Brew, a broodling who was hated by his kind for wanting things like friendship and compassion, has one of the sadder backstories of the Marvel Universe. Worse yet, the only reason Brew wasn't immediately killed in the first place is because the broodling population was at an unusual low, meaning that the Brood Queen decided to leave the tiny alien alive until their species was once more abundant, which is maybe the saddest reason not to be killed ever. Number 5, Maggots. Perhaps the most underrated X-Man ever, Maggot's backstory almost justifies his power being two gross matter-eating maggots taking up the space where his stomach should be. Born with these, Maggots suffered from terrible stomach pains, which were initially diagnosed as stomach cancer. Terrified of bankrupting his family with expensive medical treatments, a 12-year-old Maggot decided the only solution to his problem was to leave his home and kill himself. Mercifully, Magneto was able to track the boy down before this happened, explaining to him the true nature of his stomach problems. Even this wouldn't quite lead to a happy ending, as when Maggot returned home to tell his father the good news, he would find the man had been murdered in the time he was away. After all this suffering, Maggot would be able to join the X-Men, where he was at least among others who had similarly tragic histories. But, I mean, the guy's called Maggot, come on. He deserves some freaking sympathy. Number 4, Mr. Immortal. Although being immortal sounds like maybe the coolest power ever, it's worth remembering that it's a power that can generally only be discovered in tragic ways, such as the case of Craig Hollis, who discovered he was unable to die after several suicide attempts. And this isn't even the most tragic part of Craig's backstory, as his life before discovering his powers was even sadder. When his mother passed away in childbirth, the spirit who took her, named Death Urge, became a sort of guardian angel for young Craig, taking care of him and making sure his childhood wasn't spent mourning the loss of one of his parents. But, as the name suggests, Death Urge also convinced Craig to get into many, many dangerous situations, culminating in him convincing the boy to burn down his childhood home, which would lead to the death of his father. With all this in mind, it's all the more impressive that Mr. Immortal is so cheery after all that's happened to him, although that might have something to do with the oxygen cutting off from his brain every time he dies. Number 3, Zeitgeist. The charismatic leader of the X-Force, Zeitgeist's gross superpowers, which allow him to projectile vomit acid, have been seemingly responsible for a series of traumatic events throughout his childhood and into his adult years, which may explain why he is as insufferable as he is in the series. The most disturbing of these events comes in the very first time Axel Clooney's powers manifested, as they first emerged when Zeitgeist was in the middle of kissing his high school sweetheart, leading to Axel instead burning her face right off her. Ever since then, Zeitgeist would suffer from nightmares that revolved around this night, although he would be unable to recall the girl's name every time it happened, with it being implied that this was not the sole time that Clooney's powers would result in him hurting loved ones. His cold and hostile demeanor becomes much more self-explanatory, although considerably more tragic. Number 2, Throg. Of all the heroes you'd expect to have a tragic backstory, a member of the Pet Avengers has to be pretty low down on that list. But despite his bright, cheery amphibian exterior, Throg actually has a heartbreaking backstory, and a very, very surprising one. He wasn't even born as Puddlegulp, his frog name before he picked up a fragment of Mjolnir. No, Throg was first known as Simon Walterson, as we learn in the Pet Avengers series that Throg started out life as a college football star who was, in fact, human. After the death of his wife and unborn child in an unexplained accident, Simon fell into a deep depression, turning to witchcraft to try and speak to his loved ones just once more. While a witch successfully did just that, she was also out of Simon's price range and he was unable to pay, so she turned him into a frog. Which means that yes, your favorite child-friendly Pet Avenger has one of the most messed up stories in the entire of the Marvel Universe. Enjoy the nightmares. Number 1, Rage. In the most cliche cliche origin story of all time, Elvin Halliday found himself exposed to toxic waste after hiding from his school bullies, the fumes of which would transform him from his weedy 13-year-old self into a super strong, invulnerable 30-year-old, which makes perfect sense if you squint real hard. It's seemingly totally ignored that while Elvin is a buff badass now, he is still also internally a teen, meaning that all the life-threatening adventures he goes on are less cool and more morally dubious, as the Avengers send him on several missions before they discover his true nature. This lack of concern for the technical 13-year-old would stay consistent throughout Rage's time in comics, all the way up to his death in Venomized #2, proving that Marvel will kill as many kids as they want, as long as they don't technically look like children. And there you have it, folks, 10 Marvel heroes with surprisingly tragic origins. Feel free to drop this video a like if you enjoyed it, and drop me a follow on Twitter at @USlyDogU. Also, feel free to swing on by whatculture.com for daily news, lists, articles, and all that other good stuff. I'm Will for What Culture, thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you next time.